It's no secret to any of us that our society has become intensely woke. It's easy to lament and complain about this reality. I do it often. But one of the things that I appreciate is when someone not only diagnoses the issue, but presents ways to remedy it. Today, I am pleased to welcome Teresa Mull, author of Woke Proof Your Life. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, welcome to Timeless. I hope that you're having a great week. Just a reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified with every new piece of content that I post, whether it's Dennis and Julie, Timeless, or Julie Noted. And also be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman. I'm so happy today to welcome Teresa Mull to the show. She's a reporter and writer. She's the assistant editor of The Spectator World, a policy advisor for education at the Heartland Institute, a contributor of the book Liberty Works, How Freedom Makes People Happier, Safer, and Healthier, and the author of the most recent solutions-oriented book, How to Woke-Proof Your Life, a handbook on escaping modern political madness and shielding yourself and your family by living a more self-sufficient, fulfilling life. Boy, what an important book, especially during these times now. Hi, Teresa. Welcome to Timeless.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So this book came out about a month ago, and as I just said, I think that there is no better time than the present to write on a topic like this. And what I appreciate about your book is that you also talk about how to educate your children in a way that is away from all of this woke sludge. I know that a lot of parents are very worried about sending their kids to school and having them come home identifying as a different gender, spouting some crazy opinions. So we will definitely get to specifically this point about parenting. But first, you start your book by providing a definition of woke. And you also write, brace yourself for that definition. Can you please tell us what that is?
Absolutely. I have sort of two definitions. One is shorter and more succinct, and I'll give you the longer version now. I define wokeness as a radical socio-political ideology characterized by the manipulation of noble goals for the purpose of controlling and destroying society. So that's the longer definition. The shorter one is that wokeness is basically political correctness on steroids. A lot of people get confused about what woke actually means, and I think that's on purpose. I think the woke puppet masters are purposely trying to confuse us and use these kind of vague terms. But basically, it's political correctness. It's radical left-wing ideology on steroids. It's a form of evil that's been around for a long time. It just kind of has some updated language and terms that go along with wokeness, and it's definitely exploding. I think a big part of that has to do with social media and mainstream media, but that's my definition.
What you said about noble goals is, I think, really important in this definition of woke because it makes it built into it is this difficulty for people to disagree. Because if you say, for instance, that you're, as many people say, that you're anti-Black Lives Matter, think about that name, Black Lives Matter. It's not just a name of an organization, it's a statement, it's a full sentence. So by saying I'm anti-Black Lives Matter, it baked into it is this assumption that you are somehow anti these noble goals. So it's this very interesting and deft trick to have the foundation of the woke ideology, if you will, be based on these noble ideas.
Yes, the people who are the masterminds behind the woke movement are very clever. They know what they're doing, they know how to manipulate people. And that's why I write in the book, whenever you hear someone spouting a woke talking point, it might be tempting to write that person off and say, I don't want to have anything to do with that person. They're lost. They're just corrupt like the rest of the left. But they are so talented at using these terms and twisting them and making all of their agenda items sound so positive. Of course, Black Lives Matter. You look at the LGBT movement and it's all rainbow flags and parades and happy things and it's all positive. And diversity, equity, and inclusion are positive things. But then whenever you look at the way that they are making these noble goals come about, there's nothing noble about it. It's all about control. It's all about the people who are behind these initiatives gaining more power, more control, more prestige, more earthly gain, essentially, and the rest of us suffering. So, yes, certainly, it is an evil movement, and Satan is the father of lies, but he's also very crafty. So it's easy to be taken in by wokeness and all of these vague terms, and a lot of people have been, but we need to certainly look beneath the surface and pull back the curtain a little bit. And when we do that, we realize how really evil this movement is.
I often say that sometimes the issues that the left or the wokesters identify are not unfounded. In other words, they are legitimate issues. Now, of course, these individuals tend to exaggerate the extent to which they are issues. But if you take something like police brutality, of course, a small amount of police brutality exists, and that's an issue. If you take income inequality, that's an issue. If you take disparate opportunities in education, that is also a legitimate issue. But my issue, if you will, with them is that the solutions that they provide do nothing to help the problem and, in fact, exacerbate the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever you look at the way that they bring about all of these initiatives that they purport to be so noble, as I said, the rest of us are the ones who are giving things up. The rest of us are the ones who are suffering. So, my favorite example is climate change, which I think is a completely under reported symptom of wokeness, or one of the woke weapons that I think is one of the most evil, because it affects everyone and everybody seems to be so easily taken in by it. But you look at the way that people who are pushing climate change initiatives behave themselves. Al Gore, for instance, they did a study on the amount of energy consumed by his house with all of his he has a ton, I guess, a ton of solar panels and things like that, but he puts out he uses more energy and pollutes more than like 5 families put together or something like that. It's crazy. So these people, they say that they want to bring about all of these noble things, but they're not suffering themselves. They're not giving anything up. In fact, they are just the ones who are gaining everything in the end. And they're using people who do actually have legitimate issues, in education and in the inner cities, and these people who are suffering, and they are basically taking their problems and making themselves the ones who benefit from them. So you really have to look at who's sacrificing here, who's giving something up, who's suffering, and who's making the gain. And every time with every single woke initiative, it's always a radical left wing ideologue who's benefiting.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about the presence of legitimate issues that are kind of the foundation of the woke distortion, and also the noble goals. And you discuss this idea of toxic empathy, which is very much wrapped into this, where people think, oh, again, the issues that they're talking about are legitimate. The goals seem to be noble. So I'm going to go along with this because I want to be empathetic. But as you say, it's toxic. So, and you also define this as approving immoral behavior so that you'll be liked. What are your solutions or suggestions to people, especially young people, who get caught up in this idea of toxic empathy?
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to toxic empathy. I hate confrontation. I completely understand people who feel this way. An example I give of what toxic empathy is whenever you see someone who's doing something that's not good for them, whether they're in a relationship that's not benefiting them, they're eating too much, drinking too much, spending their money unwisely, or something like that. And rather than say something, you just go along with it, or you might even celebrate it. Somebody gets engaged to someone that it's a toxic relationship, but you want to be liked by that person. You don't want to be the weirdo who kind of stands up and then is ostracized for speaking out. So you go along to get along. And I think that's what has gotten us in the place where we are, with wokeness seemingly being so rampant and everywhere. So that's obviously a problem, and a lot of people are pushing back now. We saw what happened with Bud Light and Target and those various controversies where wokeness goes so far and then people freak out. But we need to freak out a little bit more before we get to that point. So what I would say to young people is that you need to be thinking of your future. You know, what do you want the world to look like that your children are going to be growing up in? What do you want it to look like whenever you're getting to retirement age, or even now? You know, do you like this world that we're living in where every time you make a purchase or every time you go somewhere, every time you look at social media, you're being forced to pick a political side, and you're basically being forced to fight with your neighbor? You know, is this the kind of atmosphere and society that you want to be a part of? And I encourage people to be brave. You know, I spoke to a man who was very successful as a model in the book, and he spoke out. He started to push back against wokeness, and he was essentially canceled for speaking his beliefs. And, you know, he was bummed about it. He's lost a few modeling gigs along the way, but he said that what he's gained in doing that has been well worth it. You know, 10 times the happiness that he had before when he was just kind of, you know, keeping quiet and collecting a paycheck. He feels much more satisfied now in his life. He's made many more friends who are true friends, who actually care about him and who believe the same things that he does and encourages him in his belief. So it can be daunting at first. It's hard to be the one who speaks out and who you know, is kind of the leader there. But I think you'll find definitely that there are many people who agree with you. And this man that I interviewed testifies to that, how once he spoke out, a whole bunch of other people are like, oh, yeah, actually, I think that way too. So
Yes.
don't be afraid of thinking that you're the only one and that you're alone, because you're far from it.
Yes, that's so true. There is a silent majority, and it's just so liberating to be able to be who you are. You know, we hear on the left all the time to be your authentic self, and it's so important to live your truth, but not, of course, if you're disagreeing with their policy positions. But really, when you are being authentic in what you believe, there is something so freeing about that. You know, those who listen to Timeless know that one of my personal heroes is Niccolo Machiavelli, which I'm sure some people on the left listening would go, of course, the bigot Julie Hartman loves Machiavelli. But one of the reasons why I like him is because I think that he talks about the importance of exercising judgment in a way that we don't often hear in society nowadays. And I think this goes along with our discussion of toxic empathy. We are taught to be compassionate and empathetic, but we don't understand that sometimes those virtues can be taken so far as to undermine the compassionate or empathetic goal that you are trying to achieve. And Machiavelli gives this example of these people in, I think it was like Florence, Italy, these rulers who wanted to have a name of being benevolent and being merciful. And Machiavelli writes that they took their mercy so far that they allowed for a lot of cruelty. And we're seeing that now in the United States, where people are saying, oh, well, you know, I want to be merciful. I don't think we should arrest people. I don't think we should throw people in prison. But then it has the opposite effect, because you're just allowing crime and delinquency and death to run rampant. So the importance of judgment here is something that I think we have to reintroduce into the conversation. It's not just that we should strive to be purely compassionate and empathetic 100% of the time.
Right. Yeah. It's like any good parent, you know, you want to give your child freedom and to enjoy things and to have the best in life, but that doesn't mean that every time that he wants a candy bar, you just give it to him. You know, there are um, guide rails for a reason. And I use this example in the book talking about the LGBT movement, specifically with transgenders. You know, that's a very damaging, we see initiative with mental health and the mental illness that is just rampant within the transgender community. And it's heartbreaking and it's tragic. And so much of wokeness is pushing that and promoting that. But, you know, it says in their big tagline is love, right? You know, that's so simple. That's another one of those really vague talking points that who can disagree with that? You know, just let those people be happy. But We know from scripture that love is not simply love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is all these things. So if you want the best for your society, you have to be disciplined. You have to care about other people. You can't just let them do whatever they want, run rampant, change their gender, their ideology, their identity, just do whatever drug makes you feel good in the moment. That's not really what love is, and that's not what caring about your fellow neighbor is. And we see the more we just let this libertine kind of attitude take place in America, the worse off it is. So we need to start caring about each other and getting back to looking at one another as people that we want to thrive and do well and flourish, not as somebody that we're just using to get something from reparations or, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. This discussion has made me think about all of the slogans. We talked about Black Lives Matter. You just said love is love. There really are so many that are trying to push you in a direction and really make you feel like if you oppose that, like if you oppose the idea that love is love, then you're this horrible bigot. I have two more examples for you that I thought of now. Affirmative action. That name is slightly misleading because, yeah, some people are being affirmed in affirmative action, but a lot of people are being not affirmed. They're being denied in affirmative action. Pro-choice is another example. No one wants to call it pro-abortion because that actually is a more accurate way of representing the position, but it's more difficult for the ear to hear. And so it's very hard to say that you are anti-choice. It makes you seem like this tyrannical person. So my gosh, whoever's in charge of the PR campaign of the left, I got to hand it to them. They're kind of doing a great job because as we've been discussing, it's really difficult to come out and say that you're anti these universal seeming slogans.
Yeah, they make it very attractive and very appealing. Another one is ESG, environmental,
Right.
social governance. First of all, those are just words. It doesn't really mean anything. And then they're so vague, you don't even really know how to disagree with them. And you're like, yeah, I guess I'm for the environment or whatever.
DEI is
Again,
another. DEI.
yeah, yeah, and they love to shorten it too. So it's like these easy breezy little terms, and they start out with diversity, equity, inclusion. A couple months go by saying that, then you just start saying DEI, and then you don't even really think about what it means anymore. And you're just so used to seeing it, you kind of just absorb it in your mind and start going along and saying these things too. And I've actually caught myself not with something as extreme as DEI or ESG, but like some of these terms, like I'll say, pro-choice, but we used to say pro-abortion, but I hear pro-choice so much in the media that I've started saying, I'm like, no, wait, I have to correct myself. And it used to be pro-life and pro-choice, and now they call them pro-abortion. I've noticed that in the mainstream media that they're very much are putting, anti-abortion rights is what they call pro-lifers now. So
Right.
they very much command the language, and we have to be really careful about that and in the language that we use too, because it's very easy to slip up whenever you hear it so much all the time.
You're so right. In the case of pro-choice, there were a lot of choices that one made up into the point of them getting pregnant. It's not PC to say, but it's true. Now, of course, that's not true in the cases of rape or incest, but people point to those examples, which are so small as far as the people who are seeking abortions. So you're right. We do have to, that's another solution, just to be very conscious of the way that we're talking. It reminds me of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's essay, Live Not by Lies, where he says, even if you can't come out, and he was obviously under a much more brutal regime, the Soviet Union, than we are under now, but he was saying, if you can't come out and speak out against the regime and against these lies, at least remain silent. At least just don't repeat them. And that starts, to your point, with language. We've been discussing acronyms, and you have one in your book that's clever. You have the acronym NORMAL, non-woke, ordinary, rational, moral, all-American leader. I love that. That's a great acronym.
Thank you.
And you list 6 ways for us to be normal. What are those 6? Or perhaps you just want to give the top 2 or 3, your favorites.
Yeah, normal is what I want to get back to. It struck me whenever I was thinking about wokeness and planning to write this book, just what it was like, 3 years ago. And certainly whenever I was growing up in the 90s, it seemed like, the glory days, not that long ago, whenever you didn't have to argue about whether a man should be playing on the girls' team or whether a biological male can chest feed, I guess it's called, all these crazy things that we're talking about just in like the last 3 years. I'm like, what happened to being normal whenever this wasn't even a concept? So I wanted to get back to that. So I think the first thing that we lost in our country, or what we're losing in this country, it's not completely gone yet, of course, is our religion and our Judeo-Christian values. So that's the number one thing I recommend that people seek. If they feel stressed out, anxious, we see our mental health crisis just getting worse every day, understandably, with so much woke chaos going on. You know, all throughout the Bible, we are told that we are to cast our worries and our cares on Christ, on the Lord, and to seek Him first. So the more we get away from that mindset, the more wokeness takes hold and the more miserable we all become. So I encourage people to pray and to seek a church community if they're not already part of one, and if you are, to spread the word of God to as many people as you can. I also encourage people to be very conscious of their technology use. So I have a theory that wokeness kind of lives and dies online, through social media, through mainstream media. We all use our phones too much. Screen addiction is a huge problem. And if you go out into the real world and you interact with your neighbors and you talk to people and you hang out with them and you have hobbies together, you volunteer, you'll find that you're not really talking about the color of their skin. You're not talking about, what do you identify as today? These things don't come up. They're pretty much invented in this kind of screen world. And then people are consuming so much of that screen time that it becomes part of your psyche. And then we see it take hold here and there. So I encourage people just to see if you're using technology as a resource, for all the wonderful ways that it can help you in your life, or if it's a recourse, if you're just filling time with your phone or with the TV, which so many of us do. And then the third thing is that I'll mention now is, well, you talked about education, of course, that's very important, but also, if you're using your screen less, you'll have time to do all of these things that kind of ignite your faculties and your senses. And that goes back to those hobbies and those clubs and those activities, those things that we used to do, where we spent time with one another and helped build a society that was pure and based on the idea that we're here to help one another and to make our country better, not to fight with one another. So I encourage people to pick, one thing that they're interested in, join a club, learn something, get a little bit of self-sufficiency. I think if everybody had a garden in this country, that most of our problems would go away. You get fresh air, exercise, you're away from your screen, you're away from wokeness, and you're doing something that makes it less likely that the woke corporations will be able to coerce you by taking your money and spending it on all sorts of awful things. So those are my top favorite. I have a lot.
Yes. Well, I can tell you that as someone who's 23 and trying to find community myself, it's really hard because, to your point, technology has so taken over our society and segregated us really from one another. But it's difficult to know where to look. A church, as you say, or synagogue, or whatever religion you are, finding a religious community is one way. But we don't have charity leagues so much anymore. Of course, some charities exist, but there used to be like the Rotary Club, and the people would go to the YMCA, and there used to be these kinds of filial groups that centered around, to your point, a hobby. And it's really discouraging to kind of like look out in the world and try to find it, and it's not there. But perhaps the solution is, well, don't look for other people to start it. You start it yourself.
Yeah, I definitely encourage people. Sometimes it does have to be you, of course. And even just, I advise people, especially younger people who maybe are struggling to find a club or a community, something like that, or maybe it doesn't exist where you live. I'm fortunate to live in a small town in a rural place, and actually went to the Kiwanis chicken dinner
That's another one,
event
Kiwanis.
today.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're always talking about how they're losing volunteers and you can't get young people and all these things, and everyone's so busy these days. I don't think people are necessarily so busy as they are just distracted, but that's a different rant for another day. But yeah, it can be something informal as well. Maybe you have 3 or 4 friends that you still keep in touch with loosely from college, and maybe every Sunday you guys, get on speakerphone or on Zoom or something and call each other and talk about, a book that you're reading. Maybe start like a woke proof book club, something like that. Or, if you have a hobby, I guarantee you that you can find 1 or 2 other people that you can get together, and then they might know 1 or 2 people, and it can just start organically and kind of snowball from there. So, I have advice for people to go to the back of the coffee shop and look at all those flyers that people put up, or look in the newspaper what events going on. And even if it's not a club or a volunteer organization, just going to those local little events, the ethnic festival at the Orthodox church down the road or something like that, just so you're out and you're interacting with people, you're sharing truth and beauty and goodness with others. That's just key, not only to, a thriving society, but for your soul and for the goodness of everybody that you interact with. And when we're so divided and alienated, and I think our screens have a lot to do with that, that's when our society starts to crumble. So we need to get back to just basically hanging out with each other.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And what you said about God, too, deserves some discussion. When you are standing up for what is right against what is unpopular, it's so isolating and hard when people are just coming at you with such vitriol. And the thing about having the presence of God in your life is that you always have a friend. You always have a witness. You always have someone who's there next to you, kind of in truth and righteousness, standing there supporting you. And that, having that, people need to feel like there's at least one person or one entity in the world that is there for them. And I think you're really right that if we all kind of brought ourselves back to Judeo-Christian values in the presence of God, we would see a lot more courage. It's understandable how in a society that has a death of God, people feel like they don't have the courage to speak up because they don't have that armor, that shield or that support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find that, if you do feel inspired by the Holy Spirit or God to speak up, and you might be a little bit afraid, but then you do it, He certainly rewards you. And I found that, part of my inspiration for writing this book was that, I have a very supportive family. I have some really good friends, and I do live in this place that, I have a lot of like-minded rural people who think like I do and support the kind of lifestyle that I'm pursuing, the book-proof lifestyle. But you go to a big city, or you're not fortunate enough to live somewhere like this, it can be very alienating. You can feel very much alone. And I wanted to give people who are reading this book a sense that they're not, because they're certainly we are still the majority. And I found that the more that I spoke out, and the more that I prayed about it, and the more that I sought other people, the more that I was rewarded with those friendships and with those connections. So, the first step is often the hardest, but once you do that, God certainly will reward you for your courage, and He'll put people in your life who will just make it so much better and so much easier. And you'll feel liberated, you'll feel joyful, because you're able to speak and speak truth and to be an authentic person. And it is so rewarding. Definitely, I can understand why people would be afraid, but I would just say, it's all worth it, certainly.
That is so true. Those who ridicule, and disparage God are consigning themselves to a diminished life in every way
Mm-hmm.
possible. And what you say about God rewarding you when you do good, it's just true. Anyone who
Mm-hmm.
has experienced, anyone who has done that knows that to be true. But I'm trying to put myself in the position of someone on the left who may be listening to this and thinking, oh gosh, how could that even be possible? But again, we live in this very in vogue culture where people totally dismiss the role that the divine has. Let's talk about children, who are the biggest victims of this woke crusade. But before we talk about children, I'd like to quickly tell you about my pillow. I use many MyPillow products, including the MyPillow, the Giza Dream bed sheets, the towel sets, and even the My Slippers. I walk in every day to work wearing the My Slippers because they are so comfortable, much more comfortable than heels. And then at the last minute, I just change into the heels that you see on the camera today. You can get all of these products at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman, which is my last name, spelled Hartman. For a limited time, you will get 60% off of the Giza Dream bed sheets. That comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty if you use the promo code Hartman. On top of that, with any order for a limited time, you'll get Mike Lindell's soft cover book free with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 and, you guessed it, use the promo code Hartman. Okay, so children. Gosh, as I said, I'm 23 years old. I just graduated from college, and I feel so lucky that I got out of elementary school and high school just in time before this woke onslaught. People think that conservatives are exaggerating about the extent that wokeism has infiltrated into education. And to anyone who is one of those people who thinks that we're pointing to this boogeyman, I encourage you to read the California, the Arizona, the New Jersey, the Oregon, the Washington, insert any blue state Department of Education codes. The radical racial and gender theory that is being taught to children is unbelievable. It is so evil to contort the impressionable minds of these children in the most vulnerable points of their lives. It's a big question to answer, but what do you do as a parent? Should you homeschool your kids? Should you not even send them to hang out with other children who are going to be at that public school? It's so difficult. What would you advise?
Yeah, it's certainly tough, but I wanted this book to give people who are looking to escape wokeness an option to do so no matter what their situation is. So I talked to several parents who homeschool their children and are currently homeschooling their children, and they assured me that it is doable. Of course, it can seem daunting, but especially now, there are so many resources available to parents, and homeschooling has really exploded in the last few years. So there's tons of support out there and people who will, hold your hand every step of the way. Homeschooling co-ops are a great option too. My parents sent me to a private school, but they always kind of, I joke, threatened to homeschool me. But their big hang up was that they didn't think that they would be qualified to teach me science and math as I got into higher grades. So what a homeschooling co-op is, if you can find one near where you live, does is basically, parents who are more qualified to teach different subjects will teach them, or, have tutors come in, things like that. So you kind of pool your resources to make sure that your children is getting a quality education. So homeschooling, definitely, if you can do it, I think is a great thing. I also talked to a couple who started their own private school. They had started with a homeschooling co-op and they liked it, but they wanted some of the more some of the advantages that a school offers, a little bit more structure and some of those opportunities. So they started their own. They literally said sometimes it does have to be you. It's a ton of hard work, but all the good things are. So I talked to them about their experience and how blessed they have been and the sacrifices they had to make, but why they did them and why it's so important. I also talked to a man who has opened dozens of charter schools across the country. That's another option. They are tuition-free schools, but they are sort of out from under the thumb of a lot of this wokeness because they are independent. So they're able to teach, classical curricula, things like that. So those are some options. And I also even talked to a parent who sends her child to a public school in Seattle, of all places, a woke kind of mecca. And she assured me that if you realize and you take to heart the fact that you as a parent are the primary educator of your child, and you make sure that you're talking to your child constantly, you're seeing what he's seeing, you're doing his homework with him, you're having important conversations with your child, you're limiting that social media, that it can be done, that your child can come out of a public school, even one that tends to be pretty woke, unscathed. So I would tend to advise people not to risk it and to keep your child as innocent and close to you and under your guardianship for as long as possible and for as much as possible throughout the day. But if you might not have another option, so I would encourage you to check out that section of the book, so that you can keep your little ones from being woke.
I'd be interested to know if you agree with this. One of the problems, of course, with American education is that we are not protecting children's innocence. Children are being treated like adults with the exposure to all of these sexual ideas, drag queen story hours and, the transgender, homosexual movement, and by the way, the reason why I'm focusing on this is, people say, oh my gosh, conservatives are don't want transgender or homosexual matters to be taught in schools. I don't want heterosexual sexual matters to be taught in schools. I don't think at any age, whoever's involved, you are of the appropriate, or in elementary school, you are not of the appropriate age to be exposed to that kind of material. But anyway, I recognize that the problem is that children are being treated like adults. But I also think that sometimes, in an appropriate way, it is okay to talk to your child like an adult. And perhaps with this woke stuff, maybe it would be good for parents to say to their children, there are evil ideas and there are evil people that are trying to confuse you. And you may be learning about it in school and seeing it, on TV, and it's not right, but you need to be courageous and stand in the face of this confusion. I think kind of pointing to this woke stuff is almost a nice introduction to the existence of evil in the world and the importance of combating it. What do you think?
Certainly, evil has always existed in this fallen world and it always will. But I would posit that with saying, I agree with you that it is certainly a good avenue by which to address evil that children as adults will face for the rest of their life, and to train them how to be courageous. But I also have a friend, Harry Crocker. He's also an author, and he wrote a piece that I loved, and it was titled "Don't Talk to Your Children," and it was essentially about keeping your children as innocent as you can for as long as you can. Certainly whenever, maybe a gay pride parade goes past your house, you're going to have to kind of explain to your child what that is. But the thing about children is that they are innocent, and that your innocence only lasts for so long. And it's such a treasure to be guarded and to be, you're never going to get that back. So I think to rush into sort of explaining what wokeness is kind of perverts what childhood is supposed to be about. And whenever they look back, whenever they're 50, on what their childhood was like, and they remember their mom explaining to them, what critical race theory was all about or something like that, I don't think that that's really the best. So I guess my advice would be to try to shield your child from wokeness as much as you can for as long as you can, because they're going to encounter evil, or at least iterations of evil, elsewhere, in great works of literature, maybe on the playground, whenever somebody's bullying them, you can explain what right or wrong is. But these concepts that the woke are pushing is, I think, if we let it allows us to push our children out of innocence too soon, too early. And I think maybe that's part of their goals. So I would say, don't let them steal your child's innocence before before you have to. So address it as it comes up, if it comes up, but try not to make it come into your world and into your home life.
Let's go through a hypothetical. Let's say your 7 or 8 year old daughter comes home and says, I learned today that gender is fluid and that it's not right to be assigned gender at birth. And, I like playing soccer, Mom. Maybe I'm a boy. What would your response be to your 7-year-old daughter who comes home and says that to you?
First, I would take that child out of the school immediately.
Yeah. Good choice.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would say, honey, there's a lot of things that you might be told at school by people who don't have your best interest at heart. And I am your mother, and I love you more than anything in this world. And you know that I take care of you all day, every day, and that I would never let any harm come to you, and that, I love you so much. So you need to trust me when I tell you that what these people are telling you is a lie, that you have a beautiful body that God gave to you for a purpose, and that God doesn't make mistakes, and that you might be confused in your mind because of what these people told you. But as your mother, I'm telling you that boys and girls are different, and that's for a purpose, because it takes a man and a woman to create babies, and that you can't do that if men and women are just constantly changing and being different. So if you are of course going to have different interests in life, and you're welcome to pursue them, but that you are definitely a girl, and that's a beautiful, wonderful thing, and you are made in the image and likeness of God. So I guess that's what I would tell my child, and I would probably get his father in there to talk from that perspective, because I think it's very important to have both a male and a female perspective for a child who is confused about those sorts of things.
I thought that was a great response because it was very much focused on being positive. You have a beautiful body that God created for you, and you're made in his image and likeness. That's a really powerful tactic, because apropos of another slogan that is totally distorted, people talk about gender affirming care in transition. That is so Orwellian. It's not gender affirming, it's gender denying. You're taking someone and you're telling them there's something wrong with you. Your body isn't right the way it is. And of course it's not care, it's abuse. So orienting it, when children are hearing all of these negative messages, orienting it in a positive way, as I said, I think that's really powerful. So finally, you have 3 tenets to focus on when you feel trapped in the maze of woke culture. What are those? Or again, if you want to highlight your favorite, go right ahead.
I guess it would be that you're not alone. Not to be taken in by the woke rhetoric, and to remember that they are lying to you because they want to trick you, because they want to get their earthly gain here and now. So I loved what you said earlier about whenever you have faith and you know that God is there with you, because you never feel alone. And the more that you open your heart to him and you seek him and you look to him for guidance in this scary, chaotic world, and you have so much anxiety, whenever you do cast that on him, you will get a sense of calm and a sense of peace. And you know that all of these storms are passing, that anything that is coming down the crazy woke pipeline, we've all seen it before, and it's nothing compared to the persecution that Christ himself endured for us. And there is great comfort in that. So I would say I like people to kind of be happy warriors in the face of all this wokeness. It's this it is serious stuff, but you can almost kind of laugh in their face and say, I have Christ on my side. I have a whole community of Americans who are pushing back against the woke madness. And I want to encourage people to, again, go and find that community and to be a member of normals who are pushing back against this stuff and are doing so with a spirit of joy, and peace and purpose. So I guess I would just go back to finding God and seeking him and asking his guidance, because from there, all the other puzzle pieces fit into place.
Yes. And one of the great things about reading the Bible is that you come to understand 2 fundamental truths of life. The first is that evil is a feature of life, not a bug. You're going to encounter evil all of the time, wherever you go. Every era of history, every generation that's ever lived has confronted evil. This is what we're facing now in our society, wokeness. And the second thing is that all good, righteous people in the Bible are tested. That is such a powerful thing to realize. So if you are a good person and you're being tested, it's kind of the point. if you take it from a religious point of view. Teresa Mole, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you, and I thank you so much and commend you hugely for writing this book.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a wonderful time.
Yes. And enjoy your rural town of Pennsylvania. I got to say, when you were talking about the Kiwanis Club, I thought maybe I should move out of Los Angeles and maybe find...
I come to Central PA. It's a great place.
Well, thank you so much again. And thanks to all of you so much for listening. Take care. I'll see you soon.